Hello, welcome to a special episode of RadioBio, put on for UC Merced's International Education Week. In this episode, we hear from 5 different researchers and their unique experiences with international research, from soil science to conservation biology.
Each story highlights the various ways we can be inspired by the world around us, and how science reaches beyond physical and political boundaries.
Join us as Listening to Life goes international.
Don't know much biology.
I'm Asmeret Asefaw Berhe. I'm a professor of soil biogeochemistry at UC Merced, also hold the Velasco Chair in Earth Sciences at the Department of Life and Environmental Sciences here at UC Merced. I'm a soil scientist by training, and my work I try to understand how soils regulate atmospheric climate and the dynamic two-way relationships between soils and human communities and everything in between. So my academic journey starts in East Africa. I was born and raised in Asmeret, Eritrea. Eritrea is a small country on the coast of Red Sea. I've been studying soils for a long time, since I was an undergrad. I have a bachelor's in soil science, and then after I moved to the U.S., I got a master's in political ecology, and then moved on to the West Coast and got a PhD from Berkeley in biogeochemistry, and conducted 2.5 years worth of postdoc research in the field of soil biogeochemistry before moving to UC Merced in the spring of 2009. So we've been here for quite a while now.
So, what inspired you to come get your master's in the U.S.?
So I had always known that I don't think my educational journey was going to end at the bachelor's level. When I was doing my undergrad, I started out thinking that I might become a medical doctor. And so the goal was for me to do a bachelor's in chemistry as a pre-med. But I found out that after learning about an introduction to soil science course that I liked soils way better than I liked the individual science fields, because it allowed me to learn and think about all the science that I have always loved, but in a very unique context, and it was helping me discover a world that I did not know really existed. Like most 18, 19-year-olds when we start college, I didn't know much about the science of soils. So it was an eye-opening experience for me to learn about the field of soil science and the fact that I can do all the science that I loved and still explore this world that was virtually hidden to me until that point. Later on, after I graduated and moved to the U.S., I toyed with the idea of going to medical school route and started volunteering in hospitals and stuff to see how I actually liked it as I was preparing to take the MCAT. And I really realized at that point I don't really like medicine as much. It did not excite me in the same way at all. And so I switched gears, went back to, kind of knew better as an 18-year-old when I made that decision and stuck with it. But it always had been my idea that one way or another, I was going to continue on a higher education beyond the bachelor's, and I think that worked out great.
Do you think your decision for the medical stuff was more people telling you that you should be doing that, or was it more like you were kind of interested but weren't sure?
I think I see this a lot in students at UC Merced. It's because when you're good at school and you read a lot and everybody tells you, you're so good at this, you should be a medical doctor. And you kind of get it into your head at some point, right?
Yeah.
And for most of us, that's the career we imagine with higher education, like going beyond the bachelor's in particular. Because, when we're young, we can't really think about scientists. At least I didn't. We didn't really imagine ourselves as scientists. We didn't know that many scientists.
It's important to explore different things, because then you find out you might be more passionate about something else.
Oh, totally. I think especially the undergraduate years are perfect time to explore different avenues, right? Because you might just discover that one that gets you excited.
Yeah. So how would you say being an international scholar has shaped you?
I mean, one way to think about how being an international scholar has shaped me as a person and my path in the academic world, I should say, is probably that I have a pretty wide worldview on what it means to, part of um, the world community. And obviously my view is not constrained by just one country or one continent or what happens here or there, which is always a good thing, and which is what you hope training in higher education and would open up the world for everybody, right? Yeah, I'm not constrained in terms of, thinking about my science, for example, by geographic boundaries or specific localities here or there that I have to do my work. I'm happy to follow the question wherever it takes me, as long as I can figure out the resources to do that work and work with whoever from very different backgrounds. Coming from, East Africa and living in different parts of the US has meant that I've interacted and worked with very different kinds of communities in every way you can imagine. And I think that has, again, widened my worldview about what it means to be a person that is involved in science and education and research. And I think that's a wonderful thing. But I don't want to paint just a rosy picture. We have to be realistic about this, right? It also comes with its own challenges, because as a person, as an individual, I'm not just a woman. I'm a Black woman, and I'm not just a Black woman. I'm a Black woman who grew up in Africa. It means people have all sorts of interesting preconceived notions about my ability, my potential, what I am able to do or not do, just based on what they think they know about people from my part of the world. And that has shown up in all sorts of different ways throughout my career and education, as well as research career in science. And so even though I think my background helps open up my worldview, on the other side, I think based on my background, people have also assumed all sorts of constraints that they think they should put on me because I am who I am. It's incredibly hard when somebody out of blue, just because of who you are, constantly keeps judging you in very, very harsh ways and holding you back and trying to hold you back. I don't know anybody who wouldn't be affected by that, right? Mm-hmm. And so having a supportive community around you that helps weather those kinds of things. I don't know that there's any magic formula, but it helps to have people around you.
Do you think being international has helped you navigate academia?
In some ways, yeah, because I hope, and strive to be the kind of person that will treat everybody with respect regardless of where they are. And that's really the key with international research, is like you're trying to go somewhere into an environment you know very little about and do research with people whose background and experiences you don't necessarily share, right? Mm-hmm. And so the kind of most important ingredient there is respect for everybody's path and every differences that we have, which doesn't mean that we don't understand each other or don't do the same kind of science. We just come at it from different angles. And if you can, convey that respect in when you're trying to achieve, or set up collaborative engagements, I feel like it's almost always doable, because people in science, in particular, the field I know most about, are always happy to think with somebody that's not necessarily within their circle. I'm happy to think about new ways and new directions to think about our research. But doing it so internationally means we have to recognize, again, those differences in backgrounds and how they might affect the interactions that we have, right? And recognizing that there's a reason we're trying to go there, is right? Mm-hmm. Because there's something unique and something exciting. But as we're doing so, it becomes extremely important to make sure that we're not looking down on people, we're not taking our stuff and just trying to dump it on them, and that if we're really going to have a healthy, collaborative scientific engagement, it has to be a two-way street, right? And our science is better for it, right? Everybody's science is better for it if we're able to do that.
I love that.
Do you have any advice for students who are international, and maybe some general advice in science?
The advice I would give to students, international students in particular, when coming to all sorts of different universities, is as much as possible find a community of supportive folks, because there will be all sorts of unwritten rules that you know nothing about, because that's just not how we studied. It doesn't mean any of the background is inferior. And finding a supportive community of folks, non-judgmental folks, that you can ask questions without having to worry whether they're going to judge you as being, kind of not knowing for one thing or another is just priceless, and it makes your life so much easier. Friends that share and appreciate your background, right? Friends who are, the kind that you don't feel, worry about being judged, to go and say, is this correct? Is this how it should be? Or am I missing something? What should I be doing or thinking in this case? And people that are going to give you unreserved responses and help, suggestions, and you could do the same forward in return, obviously, is the best thing you could do. And the other part that I think is extremely important is also that in science in particular, a lot of our success and well-being during graduate school and postdoc years is tied with our research group, making sure that you're in a supportive environment where you, again, are getting all the support that you need to succeed and, make timely progress in your degree, and that you're getting the mentoring that one deserves to get in graduate school is particularly important. And if you're not sure you're getting that, it helps to have people to talk to.
We can all benefit from science even if we don't realize it or don't agree. You might enter one field and end up in another, having the journey shape you in ways you never realized it could.
Dr. Berhe's story teaches us that by pushing ourselves to go beyond preconceived notions of ourselves and others, we can achieve great things together.
Listen as Dr. Philippe Zapata from the University of California, Los Angeles shares how he was inspired by his country.
So I am basically a plant evolutionary biologist with really broad interests in trying to understand the origins and evolution of plant biodiversity, meaning that I am interested in nature and understanding what species exist in nature and how these species form and how these species evolve and they are related to each other.
So what are you hoping to discover by doing this research?
So one of my main goals, especially coming from the tropics, so I am originally from Colombia, is that we know very little about biodiversity in some places in the tropics, and there's still a lot of plants and animals and bacteria and biodiversity that is unknown. So one of my main sort of research interests and goals is try to discover new species and discover biodiversity, but also trying to understand how these species evolve and what processes led to the evolution and formation of new species. So part of what I am really hoping to understand is not only what biodiversity we have in nature, but also how that biodiversity form and what are the processes that led to the evolution of those species.
Why, in your opinion, is it important to explore biodiversity, explain it, and try to understand the history of it today? What role does biodiversity play in science today?
Well, as a plant biologist, I believe that plants are so fundamental for everything. I mean, we couldn't be here without plants. Plants produce also oxygen. Plants give us food, give us shelter. So I think that understanding at least plant biodiversity is really fundamental because there are so many species out there and so many organisms that basically run the world and we perhaps don't know much about them. And with all this, currently with all these changes in climate and all these changes in sort of human behavior that we are interacting more and more with the environment, we can be harming some pristine areas or some species that we don't even understand how they work, and maybe they are so fundamental for keeping the whole ecosystem together. And by losing those, we might be losing complete ecosystems, and we don't even know that could happen. So I think that understanding biodiversity and still going out there and looking for random plants and random organisms is so fundamental to be connected to nature and have that understanding that organisms are connected to each other and they can sort of provide us with food and shelter and stuff that we otherwise we wouldn't have.
What sort of got you interested in this field in the first place? I mean, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So, as I mentioned, I am originally from Colombia, from the tropics, and I grew up in a city, of course, but I was surrounded by nature the whole time. So I used to travel a lot in Colombia, and Colombia is a really biodiverse country. So I was traveling the mountains and going to the lowlands and going to different forest types. And I was always puzzled about all these plants and all these organisms and how does this happen and where do they come from and how they evolve here and why they look different in different mountain ranges, and you have some species in the lowlands that they are not in the highlands. So I was always puzzled about how biodiversity evolved and how biodiversity really originated and why Colombia or tropics are so diverse versus other places in the world. So that got me starting to thinking about evolution and sort of nature. And when I went to college, also in Colombia, I learned about evolution in my evolution classes, and I was amazed that, like, oh my God, this is like a natural processes produce all these things. This is crazy, but I didn't know exactly how to try to understand it. And then I took a class in systematics or phylogenetics, and that was amazing because that class showed me how to use information from the organisms themselves to reconstruct potentially their evolutionary histories and then test hypotheses about potentially how those organisms evolve and where they come from and how they evolve in different places. So to me, that was like the perfect moment to combine my passion for evolution with a tool that also provided a lot of information for reconstructing the history of life. And I became obsessed with systematics and evolutionary biology. And as an undergrad, I was the whole time working in the herbarium, trying to understand plants and working in the field, collecting plants and trying to understand how they were related to each other, using morphological information. And then I was able to sort of come to the States to do my PhD. And yeah, I've been doing this for a long time.
That's beautiful. You were like raised in the environment and you were just inspired by it. Mm-hmm. That's really amazing.
You don't need big fancy labs with glistening machines to inspire you. Sometimes the inspiration you need is right in your own backyard.
Next time you go outside, take a second to explore the world around you.
Now, what happens when that inspiration turns into passion? And when that passion turns into direction? Listen as Dr. Gregory Mutumi from the University of California, Merced shares how his love for nature turned into his life's direction.
Just to get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you study?
I'm a field biologist. I enjoy outdoors like crazy. I enjoy looking at nature's diversity and discovering new information about patterns and processes that govern life in general. And I believe the best understanding of our planet can be learned from plants and animals. Currently, I'm looking at the roles of sensory structures in the diversification of New World leaf-nosed bats.
How did you get your start in this field of research?
From a tender age, I liked biology. At high school, I was always the best in class in biology. I enjoyed the experiments and I liked the field visits that we did. And I started off my career with forestry in Zimbabwe. I studied trees, I studied seed germination, and I felt like I wanted to go further with it. That's when I enrolled for an honors degree in forestry and wildlife. Afterwards, I enrolled for a master's in zoology. Afterwards, I enrolled for a PhD in biological sciences. I enjoyed studying nature, so it has been a long road, but one species after the other, I've been discovering and learning new things.
So what is your favorite bat? And why do you like it so much?
I've struggled a bit on that question. My favorite bat is Hippocidres vittatus. I've got absolutely nothing more than just the beauty of the bat that makes me like that bat.
Can you describe what it looks like briefly?
From my first encounter with that bat in one of the caves in Zimbabwe, I was just surprised. It's got huge round eyes. It's furry. It's fluffy. It looks something. It looks like something that would be good as a pet. And it's so strong. It's got thick membranes in its wings. And when it turns around to look at you, you feel like a human being has turned around to look at you. It's got expression on its face. So I just like that bat. Ever since I saw it, I've always thought of it as my favorite bat.
How big is it?
It's quite big. I think it's one of the, if not the biggest insect-eating bat in southern Africa. I think it can reach about 300-400 grams and a wingspan of about close to a meter.
Wow. And
It's big.
And so you said it's an insectivore?
It's an insectivore. It specializes on huge, hard beetles.
Wow.
And it's got sharp incisors.
So you said you handled these guys in the field. How do you actually go about doing that? So how do you conduct field work for bats?
Field work for bats is the most exciting part of my career. I wish I could sample bats once every month or a week every month. I've done some field sampling in Belize, and I've done sampling in several parts of Southern Africa, including countries like Mozambique, Zambia, Malawi, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. We basically have a mobile lab. In most cases, I was just measuring, taking samples and releasing the bat. So I would have a mobile lab with all my equipment for measuring sound, for measuring body parameters, for taking tissue samples for genetic analysis.
Now we hear from Dr. Samuel Wasser, a researcher whose passion reaches beyond borders.
So I run the Center for Conservation Biology, which focuses on really applied genetic, physiological, and ecological methods to a wide variety of conservation problems, really focusing on humans' impacts on wildlife. And we do kind of two fields. One is wildlife monitoring wildlife over very large landscapes and how changes in the environment and human-induced environment cause changes in their demography, physiology, those kinds of things. And the other one is forensic science, where we do use DNA to track illegal contraband of wildlife, primarily ivory, but also now pangolins, moving around the world, and really focus on trying to figure out how the major transnational criminal organizations are operating.
So I'm curious if you're hopeful at all for the future, really, and where do you think conservation currently fits in our society? Where do you think conservation biology is going to go in the future?
If I didn't have hope, I would be crazy to do what I do. So yes, I do have hope. I think education is incredibly important, and figuring out what's the best way to reach people. I mean, we know different cultures learn in different ways, and yet we've had this homogenous teaching system that doesn't reach some of the most critical people. I mean, this university is probably a great example of it, because the whole demographic here is very different from a lot of other UC campuses. And so you have an important, task to be able to figure out how do we reach all these different cultures, because everybody is smart. We all have these big brains that can make us smart. It's just that we haven't figured out how to reach everyone with the kinds of knowledge that we may want them to have. That doesn't mean they don't have other knowledge that's equally important, but it's just, so this is a really important issue. And it's not just teaching cultures. It's also teaching, so one place that I have my work experiences this interface is teaching law enforcement agencies. So I work very closely with law enforcement agencies, and it's taken me a very, very long time to teach them what they could do with the tools I am offering them.
Dr. Wasser's work highlights an important aspect of science. The impact of our work can only go as far as the collaborations and the people we reach. So together, with education and collaboration, we can make a difference for everyone, from the earth to human beings, from a mighty elephant to a humble pangolin.
Now let's bring it back home to UC Merced, where we hear from Dr. Tamrat Ghezzehei and a story about being an international scholar.
My name is Tamra Gazecki. I'm originally from Eritrea. It's a small country in East Africa. I did my undergraduate training in Eritrea in soil and water conservation. And then I went to Utah State for graduate education in soil physics. So I got my PhD from Utah State in soil physics. And then I made a huge change in research direction, and I went to Lawrence Berkeley Lab And I did a postdoc, and then I was a scientist looking at problems like how do you safely store spent nuclear fuel? Then I came back to UC Merced, and I went back to my roots, studying soils and plant roots, literally. So here I do mostly research related to sustainable agriculture.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So actually, could you elaborate a little bit more on what contributed to that decision to come to UC Merced and to come back to your roots, like you said? What was the drive?
Two things. One, although I had a really great position at Berkeley Lab, it didn't involve teaching. Teaching in classrooms and also mentoring graduate students. So that was a big draw, to have an academic position that allows you both to do research and get engaged with students. And secondly, although the problems that I was working on are great and interesting, I didn't have personal connection with those. I felt like I was addressing problems that are going to be issues centuries from now. I really wanted to work on problems that have immediate need to be solved, like how do we feed 10 billion people by 2050?
Yeah.
Hopefully in my lifetime, right?
Yeah.
2050. How do we maintain ecological sustainability while producing food? So the national lab at that time, at least, it didn't seem was the right place to explore those type of problems. So yeah, the place is great, right in the middle of the most productive region, agriculturally most productive region, probably in the world, right? So yeah. So.
Being an international scholar means navigating cultural differences and the results. Often spooky.
So I have a story actually to tell.
Please.
So my
story. Yeah.
So my very first haircut in the US happened on Halloween.
Oh my God, yeah.
I had no idea about what Halloween was. I didn't even know that day was a Halloween. I got out of class. There was a barber shop at school, so at the bookstore, so I went for a haircut. And a woman came to cut my hair. She had a knife stuck to her head, blood gushing from her on the side of her face.
Oh no.
I looked at her, I got scared. I said, what's going on? And I usually can hide excitement, and then so I just kept quiet. And then, I went to my apartment, and so my housemate, Marcus, is from Austria. So I told him, strange thing happened. When I went for a haircut, this woman had all these things, and she felt normal, and she cut my hair. He sat me down and he explained the whole thing, and we went to buy candies, and then we did trick-or-treating and all that. So what I do now is I'm also involved with international groups. A few years ago, I had funding with a large group of researchers from multiple universities that was funded by NSF. And within NSF, there is this program, PIRE, Partnership for International Research and Education. And it's designed to provide international research experience to U.S. researchers. Right? So there are so many students who come to study in the U.S., but there are fewer students who go abroad to do research. So NSF recognized these, and so they have this specific program just targeted at that. And it's not discipline specific. You can apply from any discipline. It's a relatively large grant. So we had one of those. And from Ohio State and UC Merced, we had 5 graduate students who did their research in West Africa, in Senegal. Right, so it was a very interesting project to design and to implement. We had to train our students. At that time, we didn't have strong international program at UC Merced, so my student had to go to Ohio State to learn the culture. He knew the language, but they provided them language assistance.
They speak French in Senegal,
They
right?
speak French in Senegal. So, and it was great experience for all the students involved because they had to spend 3 to 6 months every year for the duration of their PhDs in rural Senegal and working with local researchers, working with farmers.
Yeah.
And so at that time, we had a partner from Ohio that also was funded through this project. And so every summer we took 2 undergraduate students from Central State University. It's a minority serving institution. Students who didn't have any research experience, even here in the US, they were going with us, spending several months in a foreign country doing research. And soil science has, beyond agriculture, soil science has, as a basic science, it also attracts people on, especially in relation to climate change. Soil stores a huge amount of carbon, and so degradation of soil is a contributor for climate change. So that's an international problem, so there is no political boundary.
Yeah.
So.
Diversity makes us stronger. Whether it's the diversity found within nature and its plants and beings to the diversity in our world, these stories make us stronger and show us the power of collaboration and communication, showing how far science can go when it transcends borders and boundaries.
Thank you for listening to RadioBio, and we hope that these stories will inspire you to go beyond.
This episode of RadioBio was produced by Ann Deep, Julia Alvarez, and Yumari Vasquez. Artwork was done by Julia Alvarez. Interviewers were Julia Alvarez, Yumari Vasquez, Ann Deep, Lily Pennington, Jackie Shea, Jeff Lauder, and Austin Perry. Editors were Yumari Vasquez and Julia Alvarez.
RadioBio is produced by graduate students at the University of California, Merced. Support for RadioBio comes from the Quantitative and Systems Biology Graduate Group, the School of Natural Sciences, and the Graduate Division at UC Merced. You can help support RadioBio's mission of increasing scientific literacy in California's Central Valley and beyond by donating at giving.ucmerced.edu/RadioBio. Find out more about our mission, events, and podcasts at www.radiobio.net.